Good morning. It's Gary Sly and the Legacy of Handmade Objects. It's Labor Day here in Florida, as it is everywhere in the United States today. A little factoid I heard recently, some of the first labor organization actually was women up in New England who were textile workers, which kind of ties in with all this fiber and textiles and stitching that we love here on Flosstube. I'm going to venture into a different area today than I usually do. I'm here in my kitchen in Ocala, and I want to talk a little bit about the value of cooking and food and the objects that surround it and how that plays into this whole theme of the legacy of handmade objects. Obviously, many of the things that we use for cooking are passed down and become legacies, but also the recipes and the tastes and the smells of the foods that we love are part of that legacy. Food, being impermanent and something that we eat, still leaves a lasting impression on us. I can still remember the taste of my grandmother's fried chicken. I can still smell those green beans and fatback cooking on top of the stove at Aunt Ola's house out in Ballyhack. I can still taste my mom's deviled eggs that she learned from the generations of women before her. And I always love this time of year going to the family reunions out in the country. There was a big one that always happened up on Bud Hollow Road in Salem with the Moses and the Gallions and some of those families who got together. And the fun thing about those reunions is that everybody brought their best recipes. So you could always expect Aunt Dot or Aunt Ruby or whoever was there that year to bring something that you had become accustomed to through the years. So I want to highlight and kind of celebrate that a little bit today. I thought I might do a little bit of a cooking segment, but I'm not sure my photography skills are there yet, so I may work on that and see if I can make some of that happen in the future. Another thing it occurred to me I should mention to you is I'm always taking my glasses on and off. I guess many of you are my age or so and you understand that. I'm nearsighted. So a lot of time when I'm trying to read something or look at something, I have to take my glasses off in order to see it. In fact, I can't see the camera very well with my glasses on. But I figure that part of the time I'm looking at things from a distance. Just one of those little side notes of getting older, I suppose. One of the first things I think about, and I hope you'll kind of survey your own kitchen sometime and think about that, are the objects in my kitchen. And by the way, I'm very passionate about cooking. It's one of my favorite things to do. I love shopping and I love cooking. So shopping for food especially is my one of my favorite things to do. And as I look around in my kitchen, even though I've moved and downsized in the last couple of years, there's still many objects here that are part of my history and that take me back to other times. I've got the turkey platter that my Granny Sly used. When my parents died and we broke up the household, my brother got one turkey platter and I got the other. So there was never a time during the holidays when one of us wouldn't have recognized that. I pulled this out. This is an interesting, I bought this. It's just a really big Teflon pan. But the reason I bought it is because my father loved pineapple upside down cake. And I could do a big double batch in this and really make a big impression for his birthday. So that's one of the things I remember when I look at that. I've got a bacon press here that my old landlady in Washington, D.C. gave me when I was in graduate school. Every time I make grilled cheese, I think about Codell Rosenberg. I'm lucky that my father was a woodworker and he made things that I love to have around me in the kitchen. This is a mug tree that my father made. And one of my favorite and most useful objects in the kitchen is a cutting board that my dad made. And he made many of these and gave them to various members of the family. I have a commemorative platter that was given to me when I was a pastor and left the church's in Evington, Virginia. This is a gift from Salem United Methodist Church. So I would urge you to look around in your kitchen and reclaim the stories of those objects, because when you pass on or when you begin to give those things away to your family members, those stories are part of what goes with them. I've shown you before this wonderful old bread bowl. That's one of my favorite objects that belonged to my great-grandmother Lucy. And I will talk a little bit about making buttermilk biscuits in this before we end today. So take a look around you at objects, some of them handmade, like the ones that my father made, others not so much, more commercial products, but which are imbued with memories and stories that are very important. The other thing that strikes me as I start thinking about cooking and the legacy that it brings is the value of cookbooks and other kinds of written material. Most of us have some handwritten recipes that were handed down to us from mothers, grandmothers, folks like that. I haven't even begun to look at that. One of my projects is to put together a family cookbook. And you know, there's some nice resources online now where they will help you to compile that information and put it in a nice usable form. So you might want to think about that if cooking is a part of the legacy that you want to celebrate in your family. It's a lovely idea. I recently read a book that has brought me kind of full circle in thinking about cooking and the legacy that it brings. This is a wonderful book called Praise Song for the Kitchen Ghost. Excuse me. It's written by Crystal Wilkinson, who was formerly the poet laureate of the state of Kentucky. Crystal writes about the African American tradition of families in poor communities in Appalachia. Now, I grew up in Appalachia, obviously in a white family rather than a black family, but many things were striking to me about this book. She has wonderful recipes and memories of her grandparents and things like that. But one of the things that strikes me is how similar her background and mine are. And too often in our culture, we tend to divide people up. But poor folks in Appalachia, black, white, whatever, were using the same ingredients and often making the same products. And though there's an awful lot of emphasis on how we are divided, I was impressed with Crystal Wilkinson's legacy of cooking and food and how it tied in with my own. A couple of other books that I have that I love to use that help me remember that heritage: West Virginia Hometown Cooking. My grandmother, who was my guide in all of my cooking adventures when I was a young man, grew up in West Virginia. And then I also have a book by John Tullock called Appalachian Cooking. A lot of these things are familiar to me, but sometimes there will be new things that I've never tried before that tie in with my heritage. So those are great to have. And another favorite book that one of my kids gave me by Phoebe Bailey is called The African American Cookbook. And even before I read Praise Song, Crystal Wilkinson's book, I realized that many of the things that are cooked in the South and are called soul food were also an important part of the legacy in my family as well. Of course, another nice thing about cookbooks is that they can take you across the ocean or into other heritages and legacies as well. So I love my Japanese cookbook. There's some things in there that I love to work with. I have a wonderful Thai cookbook. I'm sure you could go through your shelf and find different interesting things that you've tried along through the years. One of my favorite is Greek cooking. I love Mediterranean food, and of course we know a Mediterranean diet is very healthy for us too. And as I've traveled in different parts of the world, I'm taken back to some of those places when I look at these cookbooks. Finally, in the way of cookbooks, I always remember my Moosewood cookbook, one of my favorites. My daughter is vegetarian, became so when she was a teenager, and it's always been helpful for me to have a really good vegetarian cookbook. And if you've never discovered Moosewood, There's some amazing recipes in here. Of course, you can throw some meat in if you decide you want to, but just for instance, her tomato sauce recipe here is one of the best you're going to run across. So already, if you go and take a survey and you look around your home, you're going to find objects and cookbooks and memories that help take you back to the culture of cooking. And like I say, even if cooking is an impermanent thing, which either spoils or is eaten or whatever, the memories of those are some of the longest lasting memories that we have. Taste and smell tend to be some of those memories that carry forward for us through the years. Now, I mentioned that I'm going to work on a family cookbook. I actually have started a little bit of it, but that's not an area that I've really focused on very recently. But I am lucky to have one cookbook from my own family, the Paetzel family. Paetzels were cousins of mine. Aunt Bessie Paetzel, for whom the book is dedicated, lived to be 99 years old, and she was the sister of my grandfather. And this bread bowl, Grandma Lucy's, was Bessie and my grandfather Luther's mother. So there's a lot of connections there. But when I'm looking for an easy traditional biscuit recipe, I almost always go to the Paetzel family recipe book. And one of my second cousins, Jean Paetzel Covington, who is, I think, let's see, no, probably not. There's one cousin from that family still surviving, but it's not Jean. It's another one of those sisters. Anyhow, buttermilk biscuits, and I had thought that maybe I would try cooking these for you today, but I decided I'm not real sure how to do that film-wise yet, so I might have to get some help with that. But if you've never tried buttermilk biscuits, now some of you probably have good traditional recipes and you're way ahead of me here, but 2 cups of self-rising flour, one of the greatest inventions ever brought to country people was self-rising flour, because then you didn't have to make extra measurements along the way. Keep in mind, in the country, women would have cooked biscuits, baked biscuits, or cornbread pretty much every day. And anything that would shave off some time or make that less time consuming and effortful is something that they would have embraced. So 2 cups of self-rising flour, 1 cup of buttermilk, and 2 heaping teaspoons of shortening. You can try all kinds of other things, but I think probably for good buttermilk biscuits, shortening is about the best you're going to do. And that's really all the ingredients you need. You're going to mix those together. Start with the flour and the shortening, kind of begin to knead those together. I do all the biscuit work with my hands. And then you gradually add in your buttermilk until your full dough becomes soft. One of the keys that I only learned recently and had been struggling with for some time was to know that it's very important to keep these ingredients as cold as possible. So make sure that your buttermilk is right out of the refrigerator, and make sure that you do the best you can to get this done in such a way that it doesn't get warm. And I've even learned recently that if I take the dough and put it in the refrigerator, cover it very quickly and let it chill just a bit, my biscuits are even better. So I've taken those 3 ingredients, self-rising flour, buttermilk, shortening, I've kneaded them together with my fingers, made a nice soft dough. I've got a floured surface. I put them out there, I roll them out. I don't have a fancy biscuit cutter. I use a glass and just cut biscuits, put them on a baking sheet and go into the oven. Now, Cousin Jean's recipe calls for a 450-degree oven. I find the hotter the better, and so my oven goes to 500, and I cook my biscuits at 500 degrees. So the 2 hints that I think I've learned through the years to make my biscuits better are to make sure my ingredients are as cold as they can possibly be when I put them together just before they go into the oven, and using as hot of an oven as you possibly can. Now you're going to have to keep your eye on those biscuits. Make sure you don't burn your biscuits. Put them high enough up so that you don't burn the bottoms and can't see them. And when you take those biscuits out of the oven, that's one of the most wonderful things you're ever going to run across. And it takes you back to those memories of somebody else. Now, my favorite thing to have with biscuits, and I shouldn't say this because it's cholesterol city, is sausage gravy. And that's such an easy recipe that I can describe it for you with very little effort. You take a pound of sausage, try to find some good country sausage, maybe with a little spunk to it, a little bit of spice, but that's up to you. Fry that up nicely. Do not drain the sausage. Put a half a cup of flour straight into that sausage and the grease that goes with it. Mix that all together until it's a nice paste. Put in 2 cups of milk, salt and pepper to taste, and cook that up until it's nice and bubbly. That's actually creating, with the sausage in it, a bechamel sauce, which is a very fancy French cooking technique. But back in the country, we didn't call it bechamel sauce, we just did biscuits and gravy. That's a way to start out your morning and take you back to years gone by. And I can still kind of imagine Grandma Lucy standing in her kitchen 130 years ago, or however long it was that she started cooking as a young woman. She died in the 1930s, so it would have been pretty far back when she started making biscuits in this bowl. And I can imagine that those biscuits are very similar to the ones that I make today. And the cool thing, I think I mentioned this before, Grandma Lucy's DNA is still embedded in this bowl. So when I cook and when I create biscuits, I'm sharing physically in the legacy. So that's it for today. I'm going to go, I've made myself hungry now, so I'm going to have to go find something to eat. I hope you have a restful and pleasant Labor Day, and that the rest of your week is wonderful. In the weeks to come, I'm going to take you on some tours of my new place, my new shop. I'm in the process now of kind of figuring out how that's going to look and what kind of things are going to be there. So stay tuned, and I'll have some adventures coming up with that soon. So as always, this is Gary Sly, and this is the legacy of Handmade Objects.